Morning, everyone. Happy Friday to all of you. Hopefully it's the last Friday before holiday break, hopefully for most of you. Thank you for joining us for today's Know Better, Do Better series. This is episode, oh my goodness, what are we on? 5, 6, something like that?
Six.
The bit.ly link for this session is at the bottom of the screen, and it will give you access to the slides for today's session. It will also appear again throughout the session, and I'm also putting it in the chat as well as people are coming in. So hopefully you can look to the chat for that. Okay. So my name is Sarah Loba. I am a literacy and MTSS consultant at the Capital Area Intermediate Unit. And today we also have our training and consultation supervisor, and that is Amy Healy. She's in our Zoom screen right there, waving.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay, so as always, our learning intentions for our session today are to address a common practice, explain why it is problematic, and discuss the research surrounding evidence-based practices and some better practices that can be used instead to support reading, writing, and language for all students. So today's topic is word walls. And so word walls are collections of words, typically in areas of the classroom that are usually displayed with large letters and they're highly visible. So typically words on word walls are organized alphabetically by the first letter of the word. And many times high frequency words or grade level focus words or irregular words can be included on a word wall. So in some classrooms, content vocabulary might also be mixed in with some of the other words on the word wall. So here are a few examples of some word walls, although I'm sure you're all really familiar with what a word wall looks like, right? So here we see an example of a word wall that has word shapes, which we've talked about in a previous Know Better, Do Better session as being a practice we want to avoid, right? Because that makes it look like we're trying to visually memorize words instead of actually read them. So this word here, this word wall actually has like a double whammy, so to speak. Like has a lot of stuff we don't want to do on it. So as I mentioned before, there are a lot of different words on word walls. Sometimes word walls can contain high frequency words or sight words. Sometimes they might be focused on spelling words and maybe alphabetically organizing those. Sometimes the word walls include a vocabulary focus with content area vocabulary or unit chapter vocabulary or parts of speech or something like that. So the intended purpose of a word wall is to be a tool or a reference for students to use for spelling and writing. It's also used as a way to provide and help students learn high frequency words or to reinforce sight words or other selected words. And sometimes the intention is to help build vocabulary and reading comprehension. But there are a few problems that word walls can create. So one of the major problems is that word walls function opposite of how we learn language, because we learn speech first and then we attach the print. So word walls assume that students already know the print to match the sound. So
Phone call completed.
word walls actually work backwards from print to speech instead of from speech to print, which can be very confusing and difficult for students, especially those who are having difficulty learning to read or having difficulty learning the code. So word walls are often organized alphabetically by first letter and not by sound. So students can become confused when we place words like the word the under the letter T, or if we place a word like I, E-Y-E, under the letter E, because the letter E in I makes the I sound. So that's not where we would look for that typically. So these practices focus students' attention on the visual features of the printed word and distract from those essentially important sounds in the word. So actually organizing a word wall in this way requires students to already know how the word is spelled. So it kind of defeats the goal of supporting spelling. So they might have to guess which word is the word they need because they can't find it under the letter that they think it should be under, or they look at the visual cues on the word wall and that draws their eyes away from the word. So this means that word walls can kind of promote guessing, encourage students to rely on rote memorization to find the words, especially when they're used as an aid for spelling or spelling during writing. And we know that evidence suggests over and over that reading is not a visual memory task. So Anne McGovern kind of states that we have lots of word walls hanging up, but we don't often use them meaningfully. And let's be honest, they take a lot of time to put up and take down every year. So let's find some strategies that might work a little better and help us be a little bit more efficient with the time we have. Okay, so, all right, Amy, take it away with the research.
All right, so let's think about the research first based on some things that we've talked about in previous sessions. So I'm not going to go into great detail because we've spent many sessions already up to there that actually applies with this today. So first of all, reading, we know, is a language-based skill, right? So reading requires readers to be able to map these speech sounds into print. And we've talked about this several times now this year of how the brain learns to read and that whole process of mapping those speech sounds to print. When we read words, we're not really reading the actual words. If you think about it, we are reading those representations of speech sounds. So we have the speech sound, those phonemes, and the grapheme, the letter or those letter combinations, is what is the representation or the symbol for those sounds. We know also through research the importance of phonological awareness and how essential that component is for reading. So this kind of sums up a lot of what we've been talking about. As far as word walls, though, if we go ahead onto the next slide here, there is actually no published study on the effectiveness of word walls, which I find very fascinating, right? There's a lot of research out there, a lot of not published or not a lot of dissertations, but there really isn't anything that has been peer reviewed showing the effectiveness of word walls. Likewise, we've heard many times, and Sarah and I have both done training on sound walls, and many of you may implement sound walls. Sound walls are a fairly newer concept. There are studies that are underway. However, there's no research to support the effectiveness of those at that time, which is interesting. So we're not saying that word walls are completely bad. We're not saying do sound walls instead. Instead, we want you to think about what is that purpose? What the research does support, and this is what Sarah was already talking about, is that speech to print aspect. that learners perceive language from a speech to print manner. We have the sounds and then we map them to the print. A sound wall works in that manner. A word wall works the opposite. It goes from the print to speech. So when we're thinking about word walls, think about why are we using it? There are, and I'm going to go through, there are cases where they are okay to use. So we just need to think about, is it a spelling thing or is it a vocabulary thing? Better things to do. What could we do instead? So first of all, Cheryl Filito and we'll see in our resources, she has a resource in there about the science before sound walls. And she shares a lot of really good implementation or things to consider. And these are just a few from there, that instead of a word wall, maybe the first thing you're going to do is nothing. Maybe you're just not going to put anything in its place. Maybe you're going to do one of the other following that we're going to talk about or learn more about sound walls. So maybe one of those things is using instructional posters, and those posters would be your phonics focus skills on, whatever phonics skill you're working on that's aligned with your explicit phonics instruction. Or maybe instead of the word wall, you're going to teach the heart words that we've talked about those earlier in this series. Or maybe you're going to consider doing a sound spelling wall that's going to support the spelling and writing. So again, think about, is the purpose of your word wall right now for spelling and writing? In that case, let's look at something else. Let's take that down. Let's think about instructional posters. Let's think about teaching heart words. Let's think about maybe a sound spelling wall and some of those other things. If it's for vocabulary, then we're thinking a different side here. So maybe we can shift our word wall to more of maybe using it as a vocabulary tool instead, which would mean using a different set of words. So maybe use the word walls to with vocabulary or morphology instruction. One of the things that research really supports with vocabulary, and we talked about this in a previous session, is semantic maps, being able to categorize words. Our brain categorizes words. So here's several pictures of what that would look like, semantic mapping. Maybe your word wall transforms into something like this. So these are several examples that I pulled off the internet, that some are kind of posters, some you can see hanging from the ceilings. A lot of them go around like a route, or in the middle there's a concept map around transportation. So you can see like all of these actually are working on what is the vocabulary, what are those words. The one in the left at the top, you can see here we have words like scared and mad, and what is some really rich vocabulary that we can use. And these are word walls, essentially. They just don't look like the typical ones that we might see. So this would involve that vocabulary or that morphology instruction. In that case, yeah, let's do that. So let's take you through a lot of resources that we've shared here. So the first one, and within these resources, there's resources. So there's so much that you can find in these links. This first one is all about sound spelling walls. So if you want to make the move to the sound spelling wall and you want assistance, reach out to Sarah and I. We can definitely help with that. This is a resource that I use with Pam Kastner and Tambra Eisenberg for a training last summer. And it has QR codes to a whole bunch of videos on learning more about sound walls. And then the bottom section, if you scroll down a little bit, Sarah, go up. Yeah, right there. The getting started with sound spelling walls. Those are some awesome links right there. The one goes to Cheryl Filito's Science Before Sound Walls. It's a fabulous resource. On the one above that, Stephanie Stoller's Getting Started Guide. That's a really great resource there. The other two on the left will actually show. The calendar that you see there is an example of, if you're implementing a sound wall already, what's something that you can do next. You can think about what is your focus on each day. This is just an example of one we put together for our participants to say, we want to, sound wall isn't just something that's on the wall. We want to keep coming back to it every day and using it as an instructional tool. So lots of stuff in that one. The next one there is Tools for Reading. And Tools for Reading is a great site, has a lot of things that you can take a look at in there. You'll have to do a login to get to that. So I don't know, you don't have to go into it, Sarah, if you don't want to put your login there, but you'll have to set up an account. But they have a lot of free stuff in there. And it'll take you to a lot of other resources are in there as well, like West Virginia Phonics is actually stored there. A lot of things you can purchase. You see the picture to the right with the kid lips and the mouth pictures and sound spelling cards. They sell all of those. They sell sound, what's the Soundwall Solutions program. But they also have free resources in there for teaching, instructing with sound walls, and also some other things. So when I talked about those instructional posters, there's some resources in there that are free, and some tools, some example lessons, a lot of great stuff. If you go over to the next one on the right there, the picture, that while I was talking about the instructional posters, that's an example of one. 95% Group sells some. You can find some on the internet probably for free. You can make your own, but this is an example of one that's out there and one that you could purchase that isn't too expensive. The next one down, the Rollins Center, is just a great video that shows the sounds of all the phonemes. So that is one that you can watch, one that you can make sure you're doing the right sound. You can share with kids. It's only a few minutes long, but it's also linked in some of these other resources. The Kastner collection, again, if you're looking to do sound walls, Pam Kastner at Patton has put together an amazing resource of resources. Some of the things I'm sharing today are on here, and then there's some additional ones there that link to articles, that link to resources, implementation things. And then we talked before about heart words. So if that's something that you're going to use instead to make sure we're explicitly teaching the words, this is a great article from Readsters about teaching high frequency words. That if you haven't seen this before, this is a great read, a very easy read, and then goes into showing you some of the irregular words and really which words really are the heart words in the end. And then the last one we've shared before is from Really Great Reading and that heart word method and some examples of how to teach or show those little videos of the heart words. And I think one more on there to the right is the picture of another poster there. This is from Texas Reads, and they also have a lot of really good resources on their site. If you scroll down a little bit there should be, yeah, right there, there's the components of reading. So you can go and click on those, and that'll take you to a lot of other resources, depending on what you're looking for. So yeah, within the phonics or in vocabulary, we can see posters, or we can see things about things that we can do for vocabulary instruction as well, and some templates. A lot of really good stuff that they have. On the next slide, there's a few more resources. So those were mainly about the sound spelling walls or phonics or implementing more, changing your word wall to something that you want as a spelling aid. If you're using it more for a vocabulary tool, here's some resources that can help with that. The first one is Coggle, and there's a lot of other sites out there that you can go to that create these like semantic concept maps, and you can build your own. I've used these before. Once you get the hang of using them, they're kind of neat. You can create all these branches from each other. So you can make a virtual semantic map. You can print these out, or you can just use them as a tool that kids can play with and then make your own, in the classroom. And the next one's a concept map maker. Similar concept. It's an online tool that you can use to make concept maps. You see an example of it there. The next two are all about those matrices that we talked a little bit about in the past. So this word matrix, this is, I think we shared this with the vocabulary session. A handout from William Van Cleve. There's a lot of stuff in here of teaching morphology. Right in there in the middle, yep, is the matrix. So you can use this as a tool for working and teaching the matrix, word matrix. And then, yep, there's another one later on there about how to do that and use that as a tool. Lots of great stuff in that one. And then the other one is another one, morpheme matrices, the same thing. And this is one that goes through almost like lessons that you can work through. Has a lot of the different, roots in there, shows you how to put these together. And then if you go through, here's a whole example of one that's already made for several different roots and how you can make those matrices and use this for kids to build it. So these matrices can be activities that kids do, but these can also turn into word walls. And I've seen in many classrooms that they make these and they make them into posters and then they hang them in the classroom. And essentially that one poster, the one that you see here, like with Flecht, that one poster creates all these vocabulary words. So that can become a vocabulary or a morphology type word wall. So it's, again, it's thinking and shifting your thinking about what's the purpose of your word wall. Is it for spelling and writing? Then let's change our focus to using sound spelling walls or instructional posters or some of those other things we've talked about. If your word wall is for vocabulary purposes, maybe we can shift it in how we're organizing it or the words that we're sharing with the students on it and how it becomes that tool. All right. And then, yeah, there's a picture just there of another word matrix that you can see. That one's not an active link.
I think there was a school in the Philadelphia area that actually had something like this. They had a tree out in the hallway and they had all the roots at the bottom. And then they'd have these on the branches with all the different words as leaves. So they kind of built like this.
Yeah. There's so much you can do and get creative with those, and the kids love it that they can work together to make them their own. It's not, a lot of these are done for you, but once kids are used to doing this and working with that, they can start to make them themselves and have a lot of fun with it. All right, so let's wrap up here. Our next session after our holidays, we will focus on things like SSR and DEAR, other independent reading activities, and talk about, what the research says on those things. So thank you all for joining us this morning. We're so glad that you could be here, and have a wonderful day, have a wonderful weekend, have a wonderful holiday. And just remember that we're all going to do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. Have a wonderful Friday, everyone.
Happy holidays.